Thragg from the Invincible universe is an incredibly powerful big bad villain, so it stands to reason that he is seen as such a threat, to the point where he has been matched up with so many different fictional characters from other universes. It is absolutely absurd. And I myself even jumped in on the action and did a whole video about Naruto versus Thragg. However, that actually got me thinking, how many other characters from the Naruto universe could take on Thragg? How many characters from the Naruto verse would be able to stand up against this insane threat? And that's why today we're talking Naruto characters that destroy Thragg. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, getting right into it, like we established in the Naruto versus Thragg video, we are going to only be considering feats that Thragg has based on season 4 of Invincible. I have not read ahead in the comics, so we can only count and quantify what he has done so far in the show. That being said, he does still have some pretty insane feats. We have seen him go up against Omni-Man, Invincible, and Thetis. And because those three characters have a ton of feats throughout the series by this point, we can somewhat quantify how powerful Thragg is. Whether it's his attack power, being able to launch Omni-Man up into the atmosphere, or being able to chase down Invincible after we've seen how fast Invincible has gotten, or him being able to just tank an attack from Invincible. A version of Invincible, mind you, that was able to take down Conquest, something he even points out. And we can't forget how easily Thragg was able to dispatch Thetis by just speed blitzing him and decapitating him on the spot. These are things that put Thragg up on an extremely high level as far as villains go, but that being said, Naruto also has some pretty insane characters, and since we are talking about powerful villains, let's start out with the first entry on the list, because first up on the list of Naruto characters that could destroy Thragg is, without a doubt, Ishiki Otsutsuki. Alright, so this one is going to be fairly simple. I basically can just use my entire Naruto versus Thragg video as evidence, because Ishiki was able to defeat Naruto when he was powered by Sage of Sixth Path Chakra in Boruto, and also defeat Sasuke. And in that fight, Sasuke did essentially nothing to Ishiki. All he could do is use Heavenly Hand power to get out of situations. He could do nothing else against Ishiki. Ishiki was far too quick, far too durable, and without a doubt, far too strong for Sasuke to match up against this enemy. Even Naruto was having a tremendously hard time against this enemy. Only by utilizing Baryon mode was he able to go toe-to-toe with Ishiki and actually drive him back. However, a very important thing to note was that Baryon mode was incredibly special. Every single time Naruto made contact with Ishiki, part of Ishiki's life force was being drained. And another thing we have to remember with this fight, Ishiki went into it with about 24 hours left to live. And after Naruto utilized Baryon mode, he had less than 5 minutes to live. So this was a version of Ishiki that was up against the clock. So in this hypothetical battle, if we took away this hypothetical death sentence that Ishiki has, I feel like he would be able to take out Thragg with relative ease, just based on the fact that he was able to take out Naruto and take out Sasuke. However, if you want to get a little bit more into how exactly he could do this, aside from just being way stronger and way faster than Naruto and Sasuke, his Sukuna Ikona that could shrink things and then make them larger again would be such a broken ability, because it would be similar to how I described the Rasen Shuriken being able to damage Thragg, because those attacks work on a cellular level. They are so microscopic that they would be able to pierce through Thragg. So in this hypothetical battle, Ishiki would be able to utilize this ability to basically impale Thragg with those chakra rods. And before anyone says those chakra rods wouldn't be able to pierce through Thragg, those chakra rods have been able to pierce through some incredibly durable people, not to mention the fact that they pierce you when they are microscopic. And Ishiki quite literally just enlarges them to actually create wounds. So he would theoretically be able to use this against Thragg and then increase their size to the point where it actually damages Thragg. The point where Thragg then is at a disadvantage, he doesn't have an insane regeneration that Naruto has. It isn't instantaneous. Yes, Viltrumites can survive from pretty crazy things. Mark quite literally got his guts ripped out and still lived. But the important thing to note is that Mark took about 2 months to recover from this in the show. In this battle, Ishiki would not wait months for Thragg to recover. This is a battle that would continuously go on. So that is why I feel like Ishiki would just be able to trounce Thragg, especially if the time limit wasn't a factor. And even if it was, I feel like Ishiki still comes out on top. But since we were talking about Ishiki, we also should talk about his alter ego, Jigen. Now, Jigen also has the same feat that Ishiki has, and that is being able to go toe-to-toe with with an adult Naruto and adult Sasuke and push them back to the point where Sasuke had to retreat and Naruto got sealed away. So considering the fact that you made the two strongest shinobi in the world go totally on defense to the point where one had to escape and the other was totally immobilized, not able to fight, not to mention the fact that Jigen quite literally punched through the Susanoo and also punched through Naruto's Nine Tails avatar mode, it would stand to reason that he would be able to do more than enough damage to take out Thragg. Not to mention the fact that the attack he was going to unleash in Konoha would probably be enough to at least damage Thragg to a degree. And if you want to get a little bit cheap about this, I feel like Jigen and Ishiki could just quite simply trap Thragg in another dimension. He could open a portal similar to how he did with Naruto before their first fight and trap him somewhere else, somewhere with no food, somewhere Thragg could not survive, and then the battle is over. And yes, I am counting that as a win state because if you remove your enemy from the battlefield and they have no way to return and they can't ever attack you again, that is to me a pretty solid win state. But since we were talking about the ability to teleport away, we have to also talk about the next entry on this list. So coming in next on the list of Naruto characters who could absolutely destroy Thragg, we have Sasuke Uchiha. Now, I know I just talked about Sasuke losing 2 different times. However, these were 2 battles against quite literal space gods, and I know Thragg can sometimes be compared to like that. However, I feel like there are certain things in Sasuke's kit that Thragg would not be able to deal with. So I'll just start with the first one. If Sasuke teleports Thragg away, opens up a portal, and then causes Thragg to go into some type of dimension where there is no food, maybe there's no water, maybe there is no way for Thragg to return, that will create a win state for Sasuke. That would create a scenario in which Thragg has no way to return to the battlefield. He would be trapped forever until he eventually dies. Also, another thing we have to remember is adult Sasuke is pretty much on par with Naruto, especially when we're talking about attack power and speed. So considering the fact that I mentioned that in my opinion Naruto's speed surpassed Thragg's, we also probably can assume that Sasuke's speed is on par with that as well. So his speed probably surpasses it as well. However, he also has the Sharingan, something that's going to be able to predict and read Thragg's moves relatively easily, because as much as I love Invincible, the Viltrumites do have a pretty simplistic fighting style. They utilize big punches, some of them utilize kicks, and then as a killing blow, they utilize that hand spear. But aside from that, they don't have anything crazy that Sasuke would have to analyze. It would be pretty much a straight up fight. And if Sasuke breaks out any of his crazy attacks, like utilizing his Susanoo, utilizing his Amaterasu, he would be able to do significant damage to Thragg. Now, would Thragg be able to break through Sasuke's Susanoo? He might be able to. However, I don't think he'd be able to one-shot it like Jigen did. I think it would take multiple blows, and by the time he would start to crack through Sasuke's Susanoo, Sasuke could utilize Amaterasu in combination with Kakatsuchi, his flame control, similar to how he did when he was fighting against the 4th Raikage, to create another defensive barrier, one that Thragg quite literally could not penetrate through. And if Thragg gets Amaterasu on him, I don't care how durable he is, unless he decides to cut off whatever part of his body has been hit with the Amaterasu, he is absolutely done for, because it will quite literally burn through anything. Yes, even a Viltrumite. And if Thragg does start to press Sasuke a little bit too much, he always has Heavenly Hand power to get him out of pretty much any situation. The attraction and repulsion jutsu that he is granted by the Rinnegan, and that we quite literally see him utilize multiple times, not just in Naruto, but also in Boruto. He quite literally uses Planetary Devastation multiple times. And while Planetary Devastation would not be able to trap Thragg, at least not for long, it would be able to keep Thragg away from Sasuke, at least for a little bit. If he uses Almighty Push as a sort of defensive mechanism, if Thragg gets too close, if Thragg breaks through the Susanoo, I think it would be able to push him back at least enough for Sasuke to gain some distance so he can activate some other jutsu to take out Thragg. Some of Sasuke's other attacks, like Kirin, I don't think would virtually do anything to Thragg. I feel like he realistically would be able to tank this attack, and although it would land on him because it does happen at the speed of light, because it is quite literally a flash of lightning, and Sasuke even states that it is not able to be blocked because it is pretty much an instantaneous attack, I don't think it would be able to do do much damage to Thragg at all, if any. And then if we talk about Indra's arrow, that was only possible because Sasuke had absorbed the chakra of 8.5 tailed beasts. So because in this hypothetical battle, he will not be able to do that, he will not be able to use Indra's arrow, which was his most powerful jutsu. However, even without that insane jutsu, I still think Sasuke has the ability to take out Thragg. But that being said, that brings me to our next entry on the list, because coming in next on the list of Naruto characters who would absolutely destroy Thragg, we have DMS Kakashi. Now, DMS Kakashi we don't get to see a lot of. However, the short time we see him, he pulls off some of the craziest feats that we have ever seen in Naruto. Not only does he probably have the most broken Susanoo in the entire Naruto universe, he may have the most broken Susanoo ability, and that is the utilization of Kamui Shuriken. If he is able to hit Thragg with a Kamui Shuriken, he will literally be able to tear Thragg apart, limb by limb, and if anything actually hits Thragg more than just his arm or his leg, it will teleport Thragg away. And considering the fact that Thragg would have no way to get out of the Kamui dimension, he would simply stay there and die. He would have no way to win this battle. So that's why, in my opinion, DMS Kakashi just has too many crazy abilities, not to mention the fact that he can quite literally use a Kamui lightning blade that was able to split open Kaguya with relative ease. And mind you, Kaguya was able to take multiple attacks from Sasuke and from Naruto. So I feel like all of this would be way too much for Thragg to deal with. And another thing that I actually forgot to mention when we were talking about with Sasuke is something we can talk about with Kakashi as well, and that's the utilization of Genjutsu. And now you could argue that Thragg wouldn't be affected by Genjutsu because Genjutsu does fundamentally require the person being placed under Genjutsu to have chakra, because it simply affects chakra that then affects the body. However, if you go by the rules stated in Naruto, every single living thing has chakra. Chakra is what quite literally connects everyone together. However, not everyone is able to tap into that chakra. It's similar to how Rock Lee can't really use ninjutsu, but he still has chakra inside himself. He just can't fuse that chakra in a way that lets him actually release jutsu. So I feel like in this scenario, Thragg would theoretically have chakra. He just wouldn't have the ability or the knowledge to actually fuse that chakra together to make ninjutsu. So if you go by this principle, Sasuke and Kakashi could theoretically put Thragg under a genjutsu and either make him off himself or make him just stand still so both of them could kill him instantly or simply teleport him away. I feel like these are somewhat cheap, so I will only partially count them, but even still, without genjutsu, I do believe both of these characters do stand a very good chance at defeating Thragg more than 7 times out of 10, especially in their peak power forms. But that actually brings me to the next entry on the list, because coming in next on the list of Naruto characters that could absolutely destroy Thragg, we have Kaguya Otsutsuki. So this one, again, I feel like her feats are just absolutely insane. She has certain feats that are compared to as being as powerful as the creation of the universe. The only thing that was able to stop her was her 2 sons fighting her for 3 months straight, and they couldn't even actually kill her. The only way they were able to stop her was by sealing her in something so large that it created the moon. And since Kaguya also has interdimensional travel that is even different than Sasuke or Kakashi's, I feel like she could just simply change the dimension around her and Thragg and then teleport herself out of there. There you go. Then you have Thragg trapped in this alternate dimension, resulting in him dying, which means Kaguya would have a very simple win state. However, even if you want to take this away, Kaguya also has an attack called Ashall Killing Bone, and if this attack hits you, it does not matter how durable you are. It simply turns you to ash almost instantly. It was able to do this to Obito. It was able to do this to a Sage of Six Path Power Naruto clone, and it's implied that if this had hit the real Naruto, it probably would have ended up killing him. It turns everything to ash. So if Thragg gets hit by this ability, it would be absolutely over for him instantly. And because she's able to create little dimensional portals and then fire these attacks out, it would stand to reason that she could probably hit Thragg with one of these attacks, especially if you don't want to let her just change the entire landscape around her. I feel like she would then focus more on these type of attacks. And even those attacks aside, her durability and strength are absolutely insane, not to mention her speed. She's able to go toe-to-toe with Naruto and Sasuke after they both gain the powers from Hagoromo. So this puts her on above planetary level as far as durability and attack power. Not to mention the fact that she's probably faster than the speed of light, because again, I mentioned she's on par with Naruto and Sasuke because they had to go 2v1 against her, and it was only only when Kakashi and Sakura decided to jump in the fight were they able to actually seal Kaguya away. So that's why, in my opinion, I just feel like Thragg would be totally outmatched against this enemy. But since we were talking about Thragg being outmatched and going up against someone that he virtually would have no answers for, we have to talk about our next entry, because coming in next on the list of Naruto characters who could absolutely destroy Thragg, we have Obito Uchiha. Yes, Obito also has the Kamui, so I am going to somewhat utilize a lot of what I said for DMS Kakashi. However, for Obito, he simply can just utilize the version of Kamui that we saw him use in most of Shippuden, and that's because for 5 minutes straight, he is virtually untouchable. However, if he is able to touch Thragg at all, he can simply pull Thragg into the Kamui dimension, and then once again, Thragg is trapped with no way out. However, aside from this and possibly Obito utilizing Genjutsu, a Genjutsu that was able to control a perfect Three Tails Jinchuriki, I feel like Obito would probably lose any other scenario, unless we were talking about Jubito, who with the utilization of the Truth Seeker Orbs was able to one-shot multiple enemies. And as we have seen, the Truth Seeker Orbs are the most efficient offensive and defensive weapons that the Naruto universe probably has. Nothing can really destroy them. Nothing can even affect them aside from realistically Sage Jutsu Chakra. However, considering the fact that Obito was shown the ability to create more truth-seeking orbs and utilize them with relative ease, it would stand to reason that he could use these in a fight against Thragg and push Thragg to the point where Thragg can't fight anymore. It took Naruto and Sasuke combining their power, Sasuke utilizing his Susanoo over Naruto in his Tail Beast form, to truly break through Jubito's defenses and actually land a fatal strike against him. So I feel like Jubito would just have too much power and a little bit too much durability, especially because, keep in mind, the only thing that was shown to actually do damage against Jubito was Sage Jutsu Chakra. And because, to my knowledge, Thragg can't do that, he probably wouldn't be able to do much against Jubito. And I feel like a lot of what I just said about Jubito will also come into play for our next entry on the list, because coming in next on the list of Naruto characters who would absolutely destroy Thragg, we have Jubidara. Now, pretty much everything that I mentioned about Jubito will be the same for Jubidara. However, Jubidara also showed the ability to summon dozens of meteors from the sky. And yes, I know Thragg could probably punch through a bunch of them. However, if it's quite literally dozens of them, like we saw him do in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, this could be something that might be able to overwhelm Thragg. This, in combination with the Truth Seeker Orbs, not to mention the Limbo clones that Thragg would have no way of actually seeing, these would absolutely be able to do some significant damage to Thragg, to the point where they might even kill him, especially over time. And again, Thragg doesn't have the ability to utilize nature energy, so him damaging Jubidara would be pretty difficult. And even from a physical standpoint, like Might Guy was able to do, if Thragg is able to inflict that much damage, I feel like Madara could simply use his Truth Seeker Orbs to heal himself. He also had Hashirama's cells. We saw this after the attack from Night Guy. So I just feel like Jubidara has way too many abilities that Thragg would not be able to compete with. However, there is a reason that I don't just have base Madara on here, because I personally don't believe base Madara would be able to defeat Thragg more than 5 times out of 10, but that same thing cannot be said for Jubidara, because I absolutely believe that Jubidara would win at least 6 times out of 10. But since I actually mentioned this character already, let's talk about the next entry on this list, because coming in next on the list of Naruto characters that could absolutely destroy Thragg, we have Might Guy. Now, for this fight, all we have to talk about is his battle against Jubidara. The only thing keeping Might Guy from stopping and killing Jubidara was time. And yes, I know he had the help of Minato. He had the help of Kakashi and Gaara, not to mention Rock Lee opening up to the 6th gate. However, it's also important to note, a big reason they were helping Might Guy was because Jubidara had Truth Seeker Orbs, and these were a huge problem for Might Guy. Thragg wouldn't have Truth Seeker Orbs. It would just be a straight up fight. And considering the fact that Might Guy had an attack that was able to literally bend space-time, this is an attack that Thragg would, number 1, have no answer for, and number 2, if he is hit with it, which he probably would be, because Might Guy was moving insanely fast by this point, Thragg would probably die almost instantly. This was an attack that almost one-shot killed Jubidara. The only reason he was able to survive this attack was because he had Hashirama cells, and he was able to utilize his Truth Seeker Orbs to partially heal himself, so that that his Hashirama cells were able to kick in. If it was not for this, Might Guy's attack would have absolutely annihilated Jubidara. So if Thragg gets hit with the same attack that was able to bend space-time, he would be absolutely done. However, one thing I do have to note, although I do have Might Guy winning 6 times out of 10 in this hypothetical battle, all of these fights also result in the death of Might Guy. So could you really call that a proper win state if you, the person who wins, actually die in the process as well? I know that is somewhat debatable. I still personally count it as a win because maybe you are just trying to protect everyone, and if Thragg is trying to destroy the world, Might Guy would absolutely be willing to sacrifice himself, and he himself would see that as a victory. So for this scenario, I will still count that as a win state, especially because it wouldn't be Thragg killing Might Guy. It would be more like Might Guy just sacrificing himself for the greater good to actually take out Thragg. And coming in last on our list of Naruto characters that could absolutely destroy Thragg, we have Edo Minato. Now for Minato, I am specifically only talking about the version that was brought back in the fourth Great Shinobi World War, mainly because he also has a KCM2 version. So he basically has almost every feat that Naruto has, up until the point that he is able to pair Sage Mode with KCM2, because unfortunately we've never actually seen Minato be able to do this. Yes, we know Minato is virtually a perfect Sage. I don't care that he says he's not proficient in it. We see him utilize Sage Mode in the fourth Great Shinobi World War, and he is quite literally a perfect Sage. So even though he said he's not proficient, he can still use Sage Mode. However, he unfortunately has not been shown the ability to stack Sage Mode on top of KCM2. So that will be the one area that the battle would be the same as if it was with Naruto. So his reaction time might not be as good as Naruto's was in this hypothetical battle. However, his speed is on par with Naruto's, not just because he has KCM2, but because he quite literally has Flying Raijin, something that is instantaneous teleportation. All he has to do is mark an area or mark a person, and he would be able to teleport away. Another thing to note, he could also simply teleport Thragg away, similar to how Kakashi or Obito did. And this would also create a win state for Minato. And as far as attack power goes, he doesn't have anything crazy flashy, like the Wind Style Rasen Shuriken. However, his base Rasengan that was shown when he was about 14 was able to go up against a Tailed Beast Bomb and match it in power. So it would stand to reason that a version of Minato that is now an adult and also has access to KCM2 chakra would be able to produce a Rasengan that is even more powerful. And considering the fact that a Tailed Beast Bomb probably would be able to destroy a city, this puts Minato in the realm of about high country level and maybe even higher as far as attack power, not to mention the fact that he now has access to the crazy regeneration that Naruto has. So even if Thragg is able to deal some insane damage to Minato, he would be able to heal relatively quickly from virtually any attack. And even if you want to say that Thragg could just simply fly Minato out of there, no, he couldn't, because Minato has access to Flying Raijin, so he would be able to simply teleport back down to wherever he needs to be and engage with Thragg once again on his own terms. And that is it for the characters that I believe from Naruto could absolutely destroy Thragg. However, I also have some honorable mentions that I think it might be a close fight. One is Uroshiki Otsutsuki. Now, the only reason I say him is because we've seen him have the ability to simply pierce through anyone, even characters like Gaara or Sasuke, and take out their chakra to the point where they have no power. However, since Thragg really doesn't utilize chakra at all, I don't know that this would do anything to him, and it would come down to if Thragg actually has chakra, similar to how him being placed under Genjutsu is very contingent on him actually having chakra. Another character is Tonari Otsutsuki. I feel like him, when he does have the power of the Tenseigan, would be able to utilize power that is great enough to actually do damage to Thragg. We saw him split the moon right in half with one attack, so if he utilizes multiple of these attacks in succession, could he do enough damage to Thragg to actually kill him? Yes, probably. However, we also have to note that this version of Tonari got one-shotted by Naruto. And yes, I know this was an adult Naruto, however, it was also an adult Naruto that only had access to 1/9 of his power, because remember, he split off 8 out of 9 tails to go fight another battle. So he only had access to his own power plus 1/9 of Kurama's chakra in that moment. And even with that limited power, was able to one-shot Tonari. So in a hypothetical battle, could Thragg do the same? Yes, probably. He probably could knock the Tenseigan right off of Tonari. And if he does this, Tonari absolutely gets killed pretty much instantly. Now, a couple other ones that I could mention are Ashura and Indra, because these two have a lot of the same kit that Sasuke and Naruto have. It would stand to reason that they could probably win a couple battles against Thragg. However, a lot of their fights are anime canon, not to mention the fact that I don't believe either of these characters have any crazy speed feats. It would stand to reason that Thragg would be able to take both of these enemies down relatively easily. Hagoromo is another one that I find really interesting. He was able to battle against Kaguya for 3 months straight. However, he also had the help of his brother. So would he be able to take on Thragg one-on-one and defeat him? I don't know. In my opinion, I don't think he could do it more than 5 times out of 10. So we aren't going to give him the win state in this battle either. But another character that I feel like could have a pretty easy win state against Thragg would be Itachi. Now, this could be virtually any version of Itachi as long as he has access to Tsukuyomi. If he can utilize Tsukuyomi on Thragg, he would be able to trap Thragg in another world where he could do a ton of damage to Thragg. And we've seen Itachi have the ability to actually kill someone when they're inside of Tsukuyomi. So if we're operating under the premise that Thragg can be placed under Genjutsu, then Itachi absolutely has to be counted as one of the people who could defeat Thragg. Now, that being said, could he do it more than 5 times out of 10? I don't believe so. Even if Genjutsu is able to be utilized, I just feel like Thragg has way too much speed and strength. If he gets his hands on Itachi, it is absolutely over. Not to mention the fact that I don't believe Itachi would be able to damage Thragg in any way. Even if he utilizes his Susanoo weapons, I just feel like even sealing Thragg away probably wouldn't work. Again, that goes into the different worlds argument, similar to how you can argue if Thragg can even be placed under Genjutsu. Not to mention the fact that I feel like Thragg would be able to break through Itachi's ultimate shield that he does utilize when he has his Susanoo. And we can't forget that Itachi does not have access to a full perfect Susanoo. And last but certainly not least, I also have Onoki on here, and the only reason I have him is because of the utilization of particle style atomic dismantling jutsu. Now, I'm not saying that Onoki could compete with Thragg's speed or Thragg's strength. If he gets speed blitzed by Thragg, the fight is over virtually immediately. However, if Onoki has time at all, he could activate his particle style atomic dismantling jutsu, and if he activates this, it would destroy Thragg virtually instantly. And we've seen Onoki not only be able to create a barrier of this that does seem like more of a defensive move, we've also seen him more commonly use it as an actual beam, something he's able to fire out and control. And it's not something that he just uses and it deactivates within a few seconds. No, he literally used it to create a giant vortex to save himself and the other 5 Kage, destroying a huge portion of the deep forest emergence that Madara had created. So it would stand to reason if Onoki was able to fire multiple of these beams at Thragg and one of them actually hit him, he would be able to kill Thragg. However, you could also argue that Thragg was able to dodge an attack from Space Racer, so it would stand to reason that even though the particle style beam is much larger than Space Racer's laser, Thragg would probably still be able to dodge it, and if he is able to dodge it and gets anywhere near Onoki, the battle is absolutely over. So that is essentially it. Those are all the characters, in my opinion, from Naruto that would be able to defeat Thragg more than 5 times out of 10. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. Who else do you think could defeat Thragg? Do you think I was wrong about anyone on this list? Or do you think I actually might have left off a few characters from Naruto that could defeat Thragg? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.